and accusing some Republicans of wanting to sunset the federal programs, Social Security and Medicare. It set off a bitter fight among Republican leaders.
I want to talk about how the Republicans are scrambling to make it known that they never had any intention of touching Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. How absurd. What are you talking about? This is crazy talk. So Senator Mike Rounds is going to do the Sunday rounds.
Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota joins us now. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. President Biden out there, obviously, on the campaign trail, as it were, not officially, hitting Republicans all week on Medicare, Social Security, and he's pointing specifically to the plan that your colleague, Senator Rick Scott, Republican of Florida, released when he was leading the Senate GOP's campaign arm, which says, just to quote, all federal legislation sunsets in 5 years. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again, unquote.
There's all kinds of code language that they're going to use. We're going to make it better. We're going to make it solvent because it falls apart in just 11 years. Everybody knows what they want to do.
All federal legislation sunsets in 5 years. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again, unquote. Do you support that plan?
I kind of look at Social Security the way I would at the Department of Defense and our defense spending. We're never going to not fund defense, but at the same time, every single year, we look at how we can make it better. And I think it's about time that we start talking about Social Security and making it better. We've got 11 years before we actually see cuts start to happen to people that are on Social Security. And I think it'd be very responsible for us to do everything we can to make those funding programs now and the plans right now so that we don't run out of money in Social Security and that it continues to provide all the benefits that it does today. Simply looking away from it and pretending like there's no problems with Social Security is not an appropriate or responsible thing to do. So I guess my preference would be, let's start managing it.
Watch this guy scramble.
And I'll just give you an example. Later on today, you're going to have folks that are very successful that are going to be around your table. Why don't you ask them whether or not the funding for their retirement comes strictly from government bonds or from the government itself? And don't they look at other resources that help to make their retirement plans better? And I think we can do that if we start now on a bipartisan basis to make plans so that we've got the resources necessary.
When the reality is, they want to privatize it like they do everything else.
So I hear you on the long-term plans, and I want to talk about that in a second. But just to be clear about what you were just talking about, are you talking about a partial privatization of Social Security so that there is investments in the market in addition to government bonds? Is that what I should understand from what you just said?
More along the lines of allowing us to continue to guarantee the benefits that are there, but allow us to use other resources to make sure that they are there. So rather than simply saying that, and we've got proven track record in other areas of the federal government of doing this right now, but there's a group of us that have been working. I'm not the leader of the group, so I really don't want to get into a lot of the detail on it.
They want to give it to massive corporations so that their corporate donor friends can make a shitload of money.
But you do that by managing it. You do that by actually talking about it and not, doing dog calls every time somebody says, let's try to address managing it. And look, we've got right now out of a $5.9 trillion federal budget, the legislative part of this whole thing, the Congress, actually only votes on about 1.6 to 1.7 trillion of that amount that's being spent. Wouldn't it be better if we actually tried to manage the rest of it as well and to actually be able to provide that management tool that right now does not exist?
See, he's trying to sound reasonable in some kind of a roundabout way. We're actually wanting to make it stronger. We're going to fix it. We're going to make it surely to go on forever.
So I hear what you're saying, and you're calling out President Biden for what you call dog calls, trying to scare people. But I guess the question is, didn't Senator Rick Scott give an opening when you talk about sunsetting every program? You know how tough it is to pass anything through the House and Senate, much less a major government spending program every 5 years. And are you worried that Rick Scott hurt the party with this plan and is hurting the conversation that you want to have?
You know, we do want to continue the conversation in terms of how we make Medicare, Medicaid better and long-term successful. I think Senator Scott had an idea that he proposed. I think the vast majority of us would say that we'd prefer to look at it in a different direction, one of managing it, as opposed to a discussion about having everything start over again. And I think that's misleading in terms of what he really intended to do.
I wonder what it's going to be like when we're all getting our checks from the Social Security hedge fund.
But look, the bottom line is Republicans want to see Social Security be successful and be improved. And the best way to do that is to take a look at other successful pension programs that the vast majority of us, including a lot of the folks that you're going to be talking to, would include in their portfolios. But we can do that as long as the federal government continues to make the assurances to the individuals who are looking forward to Social Security long term.
They can deny it all they want. It's exactly what they want to do. Mitch McConnell can deny it all he wants. But that's what they want to do. Rick Scott was just stupid enough to say it. But he's not the only one.
So do you think that everything needs to be on the table in terms of managing it, in terms of means testing, in terms of raising the retirement age, in terms of reducing benefits for people who maybe financially are not as dependent upon them, and on and on? Everything needs to be talked about?
I think the first thing that you do is you assure people that are currently on Social Security or that are within 15, 20 years of getting it, that they're not going to see changes in the existing benefits or programs. I think that's really important so that they can continue on the plans that they've got for retirement. But second of all, you have to do a little bit of looking at what longevity looks like.
Hell, Mitch McConnell's had Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid on the chopping block his entire career. He just knows that politically, it's not viable.
And whether or not people, if they're living longer, do we have to plan to make sure that we've got the resources to be able to pay for those benefits long term? There are some natural things that we've done in the past. We've looked at moving up by a couple of months the time period in which full benefits start. That's possibly something that we could look at in the future. There may be some possibilities of changing the amount of income which is subject to Social Security taxes.
And like everything else, that's what this is about. Politics.
But let's not talk about significant stuff until we actually look at what the other alternatives are. We think that there are possibilities out there of long-term success without scaring people and without tearing apart the system and without reducing benefits. But it requires management and it requires actually looking at and making things better.
And there's nobody in Washington who's been doing politics longer than President Joe Biden. If these idiots in the House actually think they can take on Joe, well, they're just a bunch of corn pops. I'm Zachariah, Lone Star Liberal. Y'all take it easy.